Hello, and welcome to the webinar on the 4 key pillars of smart continuous testing in DevOps. I'm Cristina Cardoza, news editor of SC Times. Before we get started, I have a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. First, this webinar will be recorded and available on demand on the SC Times website in about 24 hours after the event. Secondly, we will be conducting a live Q&A after the presentation, so if you have any questions at any time, you may submit them using the Control Questions tab. Here at SC Times, we know the importance of having a good testing strategy, but it becomes even more imperative in DevOps when you're accelerating the delivery of your software and you need to ensure quality on a continuous basis. Today's webinar will look at how a unified testing solution can be the key to DevOps, as well as 4 important pillars your solution must be built on. Here to discuss this further is Yaron Kinsberner, Chief Software Evangelist at Perfecto, the leading cloud-based web and mobile application testing and automation company. Yaron is also the author of the Digital Quality Handbook and Continuous Testing for DevOps Professionals. So you guys are in great hands with this topic. Now to get things started, I will throw it over to you, Yaron.
Thank you, Christina, and excited to be here with you. Thanks, SD Times, for hosting the webinar. I think that, Christina, you covered most of the housekeeping plus my bio. So, as mentioned, yeah, I'm the Chief Evangelist and author at Perfecto, experienced in continuous testing and meeting with a lot of DevOps professionals on a daily basis, hearing some of their pains and challenges, which actually brought me to not just write these books, but also come up with these 4 pillars that I'm about to present. And in today's agenda, I will start by focusing on what is continuous testing and why it's so hard to mature continuous testing. From my experience with the industry, there are some confusion in defining continuous testing and actually sustaining continuous testing. I'm then going to define the key elements for continuous testing in DevOps, speak a bit about the different personas that I'm engaging with that are also part of different squads and feature teams that are tasked with continuous testing activities. And I will also give you some metrics and measurements. You can pick and choose from these, or also bring some of your own daily metrics to your daily activities, but I will provide some of my recommended metrics for your DevOps success. We are going to have, as part of the system, a QA panel, so don't wait until the end. Whenever you have any questions, I have my colleagues also online and happy to address any questions that you might have. So let's dive into continuous testing. And before looking at continuous testing, let's look at continuous testing from a standpoint of DevOps and look at the DevOps manifesto. So the DevOps manifesto tells us to do continuous testing over testing at the end. And that's the meaning of continuous testing. You need to do it continuously as new features, as new code is being introduced into your product, new features are being developed. And to do so, you need to have a good and robust test automation infrastructure. When you don't have it, obviously things are breaking, things are done manually, and this is what pushes all of your testing towards the end of the cycle. So the manifesto tells you, do it continuously, don't wait till the end. To do so, you need to have a high degree of test automation, which is stable. Embrace all the testing activities over only automating the functional testing. That's a critical aspect, because often I see, especially in the digital landscape, testing that is done from a UI, UX point of view, which is very critical, very important, but you need to also consider, all of the accessibility, performance, and non-functional testing, security testing, code analysis. All of these are still part of the continuous testing bucket or suite, if you like, and this also needs to be as much as automated as possible. So it's not just about functional testing. When you talk about continuous testing, it's much more. The third point, I think, in my mind, is one of the key ones, because it's all about the value of your testing. I talk a lot about test aging and adding value into the pipeline from test automation. So this is a key point and a key pillar for success in continuous testing, especially in today's DevOps journey and maturity. And this is critical. You don't have enough time, you don't have sufficient time to automate and test everything. That's a given. But you need, and that's actually why you need to have a very high value test scenarios that you trust, and they are actually giving you the right feedback that you need. If you just look at the quantity and automating everything just for the sake of, high percentage and metrics, you're going to fail. You need to put as much value as you can in the short amount of time that you are given per each software iteration. And that's a hard task. It's very hard to do, and it requires process, good practices, cultural changes, and also, the skill set within the team. And talking about the team, you also need to consider testing across the team. So I will also, as mentioned in the agenda, I'm going to address the different personas that are involved in the overall continuous testing. So it's not just the business tester, or it's not just the test automation engineer. It's much more that are involved and are, responsible for quality of deliverables, MVPs, whatever you are going to release to the market in your journey. And finally, it's also about the product coverage over the code coverage. You need to make sure that what you are releasing, A, brings sufficient value to your end users, and B, provides or it's high quality enough. Again, not about the quantity, it's about the value and the quality of the test cases that you are developing. So summarizing this DevOps manifesto from a continuous testing standpoint into one short definition, and I underscore the business risks. I think that if you are able to prove that you can continuously test in an automated fashion each code change, whether it's a bug fix, a new feature, new functionality, to identify the key business risks to your end users, this is what continuous testing is all about. I didn't mention here numbers, I didn't mention here quantities. I'm talking about efficient, high-value test automation that identifies business risk as soon as possible. That's at the core of continuous testing. But, like anything simple, we want to complicate it. So when you look at DevOps and you try to associate continuous testing with DevOps, DevOps is all about continuous delivery, right? Pushing software fast to your end user, pushing value for the value stream to your end users. To do so, you need to have a strong CI plus CT, continuous integration plus continuous testing, fully automated, fully reliable. And to do so, continuous testing, as highlighted in this slide, requires high degree of stable test automation. Again, here I'm putting a number, I'm not putting how many test cases. I'm talking about 90% of the right test automation scenarios are the enabler for continuous testing. And when they are placed into your pipeline, into your CI through Jenkins or other CI server, that's when you get high degree of automation of the entire process that leads towards continuous delivery. So how do you make this, formula a reality? Today, too many organizations that I'm engaging with are looking again at the quantity, at the coverage, and not looking at the value. And the value can only come through stable test automation that is, again, as mentioned in the previous slide, bundled into the CI. You need to focus on the high impact test scenarios that are fully and stable automated. Only then, once they are automated and can run daily and provide consistent results back to your developers, only then you can include them into your CI and run them upon each code commit. Once you've done that, and you're looking also with the end in mind, when you are developing this small subset of stable automation, you also need to think how you're gonna reuse this stable automation and build on top of that more scenarios, more infrastructure of test cases, data-driven testing, and many more. Only then you will increase the coverage, and you will maintain stable CI. When you do follow these rules of 1, 2, 3, you're not just increasing the coverage as you go along, you're also making sure that you're not breaking Jenkins, you're not breaking your CI, and continuously provide valuable feedback to your developers. When you do the other way around, when you're just focusing on the coverage first, adding more tests and more tests into the pipeline without validating them first, without proving value, proving consistent results, this is when you're just creating a backlog of noise and less value. Once you've done the right steps, 1, 2, 3, and build the trust in your test infrastructure, you can then build more automation and reach towards the 90 to 95% test automation coverage. And this is when you are in the DevOps friendly zone. Okay, this is very hard to achieve. We don't see, hundreds and thousands of enterprise organizations in this area, but still, this is how good looks like. And when you do it this way, the right way, I think that you can be quite successful. And this is not something that you do once and are done with. You need to continuously maintain this infrastructure because your platform is changing. You're adding new tests, new feature, new functionality. So you need to make sure that even when you implemented this correctly and you reach like this DevOps friendly zone, this is fine. You need to have a right process in place to keep this, in the right healthy zone by maintaining, monitoring, treating your test code as production code, getting analytics from your entire test data to make sure that you are not really wasting time or reducing the value that you used to have from your test cases. So it's all an automated process that requires best practices and also discipline within the entire DevOps team. Before I jump into the 4 pillars that in my mind are most important, Christina, let's just ask the audience, thank you for launching the poll, which of these 4 pillars that I'm about to dive into have the greatest impact on your continuous testing process? And as a teaser, yeah, these are the 4 pillars of success in my mind. You're looking at the ability to create test automation that is A, quite robust, B, matches your team's skill set, and as you will soon see, the skill set is a huge pain and a challenge because you need to match different personas within the DevOps team that are doing testing. The test execution, which refers to the high degree and parallel execution across multiple platforms, sometimes in burst mode. Lab also is the entire platform holder, if you like, for your entire digital devices, can be desktop browsers, can be mobile devices, IoT, and many more. And obviously, at the end, you need to have also a robust test results analysis. Otherwise, you will waste tons of valuable time in analyzing and getting down to the root cause of any issues that you will find. So I'm curious, Christina, to see what the audience have selected in the poll. If you can share with them. I cannot see from some reason the results. Oh, and now I can see. Sorry. So wow, that's a nice distribution of answers with the majority given to the test creation, followed by results analysis and execution. So it's a great way to start or to move to the conversation, the next topic in the conversation. This is the 4 pillars. So my belief is that you need all of them, okay? And I will explain why. Obviously, test creation starts the entire process of continuous testing. The way you author test automation that matches your skill set, provides all the support for all the sophisticated test cases, test scenarios. Let's take some examples from the mobile space today. You need to be able in a banking application to log in using your fingerprint or your Face ID and then perform some check deposit, work with a voice assistant. So it requires engagement with multiple sensors, right? The Siri or the voice APIs, the face recognition, security aspects, the camera for check deposit. So it's a very complicated environment and constraints that you need to handle as part of your test creation. And that was just from the financial segment on a mobile device. You can go on and on across different segments, different verticals, and different application types, and you see different requirements. So creation obviously is a key here. But the execution is not less important, because when you have such a short amount of time between software iterations to run your test automation, you need to be able to scale up and down according to your needs, your test execution. You need to be able to run in parallel across not just one device. You know, iOS 13 is just around the corner, and we are going to see like a nice division of platforms: iPad OS for iPads, iOS 13 for iPhones. So you're going to see a more complicated environment for testing in parallel. So any mobile iOS application will start to run on multiple platforms across multiple operating systems. Same goes for Android, and same goes for browsers on Chrome and Edge and Safari and IE and so forth. So the execution here at scale with orchestration running from your Jenkins servers or other trigger, you know, and from the frameworks of choice, is obviously a key pillar for success. If you do not have the support of a robust execution management system, all of your creation will be kind of lacking. It will lack the value that you are expecting it to be, and then you will probably need to struggle to build something on your own to match both the coverage as well as the time constraints. So that's about the creation and the execution. The lab is the backbone of everything you do. You create against the lab, against the devices that you consider as the golden devices, the ones that you see as reference for your end users. Same goes for the browsers. Okay, you need to make sure that all of these devices are secured. Same goes for browsers. You need to make sure that it's always available, because you are running the test all the time and at high scale. They have access to your backend through VPN, so you can, you know, test against your staging environment, your test environment, your production environment. For that, you need a very strong network and security layer that is backed by the lab. And finally, the analysis at the end of all these high-scale executions, something needs to kind of slice and dice the data to help you make the right judgment on each software iteration, to slice and dice the data to identify which are the most valuable test cases, which is the most buggy platform combination, and so forth. So think about everything that I've just said and try to take out one component here, and you will see that a lot of the things will break, will have, or at least will be suffering from some severe challenges that you will need to compensate somehow. That's why, in my mind, when you have one unified solution that you control, that can serve the entire DevOps team, that consists of creation, execution, lab, and analysis layers, this is when you can start becoming more successful in anything you do. If you want to double click each of the bullets that I've just mentioned, you can see here that creation, it's not just about the support for frameworks such as open source or BDD. It also covers the different permutations. It covers also the different sensors and digital capabilities. It matches also the skill set. When you look at BDD and Cordless, these are different types of frameworks that requires different set of skill set. When you look at open source frameworks such as Selenium and Appium or Protractor and others, Espresso or XUI test, these frameworks requires a lot of heavy coding skill set just to get started with. So you need a mix, because you have a mix of practitioners. You need a creation solution that mixes and supports all of the levels of test authoring, test creation. Execution, I think it's quite clear. It's not just about executing the test in parallel in scale at best, but it's also about the orchestration of the execution, especially when you're trying to build a pipeline within CI, within Jenkins and other servers or triggers. You need this execution to be fully integrated, connected to these CI servers or other solutions, just to make everything smooth, everything visible, everything accessible to the developers and the test engineers. I mentioned about the security enterprise grade of the lab. It's also about also collecting artifacts from the platforms themselves, and it's also something or a feature that a lab should have. From an analysis perspective, one of the clients that I work with, I borrowed it from him actually. He said that he's using Perfecto's smart reporting and analysis as his single pane of glass for everything that he is doing. Okay, so he's executing a bunch of tests, functional testing, non-functional, API. He's gathering all of the artifacts in one reporting system that allows him to be much more smart, okay, to be smarter about his decision. When you're taking data-driven decisions, obviously you are smarter. You are taking less risks in releasing new software and new value to your end users. That's why when you operate and you execute in a lab so many times, so many test cases, you need something to manage the execution, the test data for you, so you can continuously improve and make decisions going forward. But, and I gave you a teaser, this unified solution, the 4 pillars that I've just identified, need to serve and support 3 main personas. And some may call them differently. From doing some market research over the past, I would say, several years actually, but also looking at the current roles and responsibilities in DevOps teams, this is what we see, this is what I see. I see business testers as the manual test engineers. These are the guys that are doing great work on manual testing, developing the use cases and the exploratory testing, and actually finding a lot of bugs, but they are too slow because they're doing that manually. On the other hand, you have the developers and the SDETs, the software developer in testing, that are doing a lot of heavy code-based test automation development using Selenium, Appium, Espresso, and XUI test, Protractor, other frameworks, WebDriver.io, we see many others. And these guys, while they are very smart, very sophisticated, and know how to write in Java, they are still limited by 60 to 65% test automation coverage. And it has many reasons. It's about the frameworks that they are using. It's about the time and amount of resources. If you look at a squad or a feature team, you won't see dozens of SDETs. You'll see 2 or 3 SDETs, but you'll see 5 business testers. You'll see few developers. So between all of these, if one element is not part of the automation development, which are the business testers, these 2 can only do a given amount of test automation creation, and the market average as of today stands about 60 to 65% success rate in test automation, and this is a huge gap towards continuous testing, continuous DevOps, continuous delivery. Why? Because if you have 30% manual testing, you are not really DevOps. 30% of your activities, and not even talking about the other elements that you have in the pipeline, which might not be automated. I'm just talking about testing. 30% of a regression suite, which is done manually, is way too much to allow an organization to mature towards DevOps. That's why we see this kind of an unoptimized model in most of the organizations today that are doing early, that's the shift left that everyone is talking about. We see a lot of shift left. We see a lot of testing done by developers and SDETs early in the cycle. But all of the 30% that I mentioned earlier that is done on the production environment or pre-production environment are done manually by these business testers. They cannot find themselves in the pipeline, in the CI. They're not taking part in these early stages of testing, hence not really impacting the overall quality decision making. Okay, so in order to make justice and make sure that everyone share the same responsibility for quality, each voice is being heard, everyone needs to be part of the test automation activity as part of the continuous testing. And to do so, business testers, the manual testers, need to take ownership by using more BDD frameworks. Perfecto launched Perfecto Cordless. It's a Selenium-based cordless framework which allows you to record and playback your test automation against desktop browsers with a machine learning algorithm running in the background, making sure that the record and playback is robust and requires as minimum maintenance as possible. If you combine the business testers with the 60% test automation that is done here by the developers and the SDETs, again, code-based, JUnit, Appium, Espresso, Selenium, Postman API testing, you name it, this is all good, but this plus this can get you towards the 90% test automation coverage on the right scenarios. I'm reminding you all, the right scenarios, this is how you actually break the glass ceiling of 60-65% test automation that most of the market is standing on today. And you do want to leave, I would say, 5 to 7 or 10% at the worst case for manual testing, interactive testing. This can be some high value ad hoc exploratory testing or very specific cases that either do not require or that do not justify the effort in automation because they're only done once in every few releases, or you simply want to see and have control over the test inputs and outputs per execution. So this is the optimized model for continuous testing. You are able to balance both the test creation, execution, and management across different personas and different phases of the pipeline with the right matched test frameworks. When you do so, you are able to actually empower the entire teams to a collaborative approach. When you see codeless and code-based kind of dancing together, working together, this is a screenshot taken from my own reporting, my own repository, and you can see that in the same given time, I'm able to execute Selenium scripts, code-based Selenium scripts on mobile devices together with codeless Selenium scripts running on different desktop virtual machines, all in the same pipeline, running and providing, in live. You can see here we have a live stream showing you the quality, health of the product, again coming from different personas with different skill set, exercising from different frameworks. This is how, in my mind, continuous testing in the modern age needs to look like to make it successful. So how do you measure continuous testing success in a DevOps? And if you are not able to do so, some practices that might be useful for you to consider. So obviously, based on the number that I gave you earlier of 60 to 65% test automation success rate, these are the 5, I'd say, key reasons or challenges to why test automation today isn't that successful. And I'm again putting aside here the personas. I'm looking at the tight release schedules. We know that iterations today are moving from months and weeks towards hours. You simply do not have enough time to create test automation and chase all the new user stories. To do so, you need to have not just the right personas and the test frameworks, you need to also have developers writing code that is designed for testability, and it's not always the case. In addition, there is also a lack of test automation stability and reliability. Think about Selenium and Appium, and think about mobile devices. These are platforms and frameworks which are not always, in our favor as practitioners. They're always producing noise, inconsistent results, false negatives, flakiness, wrong element locators are being used. So there is a lot of things here that impact the test automation stability. Test execution management and visibility are not aligned and intelligent enough. I've shown you just a snippet of the test reporting that I'm using from within the Perfecto system. If you're not able to manage and get quality visibility in a smart way, coming from the entire test data that you have, you're lacking, or you're actually harming the value that you are trying to give through your test automation activities. So that's another, I would say, pitfall or challenge. In addition, you also have the test automation tool stack that is not in sync with the organization capabilities, and that's the conversation that I've just given you on the personas. So you have a bunch of practitioners, developers, testers, business testers, POs, and so forth. When everyone has different skill set, different objectives, and the tools are not there to support them, or it can only support a subset of the practitioners, the other missing practitioners simply are kept outside of the pipeline, outside of the activities, and that's also harming the overall test automation coverage. Evolving and maintaining. People today need to better look at test code, test creation as production code. They need to evolve the code. They need to maintain it. They need to, not be afraid to put code as in an obsolete end-of-life mode. People today carry a lot of, I would say, technical depth of test cases just because they were developed once and they are passing, so they're not really highlighting anything, but they're not also adding new value. So increasing the test suite without validating or making sure that this suite is valuable over time actually causes you a waste of time, resources, money, platforms, and sometimes when they fail, but they're failing because they are simply not maintained, they're also adding more noise, redundant noise, which you don't need into your pipeline. So to handle all of these few pitfalls that I just mentioned, there are few recommendations. Some organizations are already choosing one, or some organizations are actually combining few of these best practices. For example, when you do not have enough time to execute and to develop new test cases, many organizations, successful ones, are either moving to a mix of BDD, cordless plus code-based. I just mentioned and showed you an example a few slides ago. Some are moving towards more agile development process, ATDD, TDD, BDD, of course, and it allows them to shorten the synchronization. It's the Three Amigos stories that most of you might be familiar with. So that's one way of looking or addressing the tighter release schedule challenge. There are other ways of addressing it, building a consistent and unified CI. So when you do not have enough time, but actually separating the CI builds, jobs, and insights that are coming from these jobs into 2 or 3 or even more branches coming from developers, from QA, from ops, you are simply creating a lot of blind spots because you're not really getting, as mentioned in my previous slides, a single pane of glass. You're getting multiple pane of glasses, and you need to figure out, okay, which is giving me the right and most relevant visibility. You need only one CI that is unified and provides you the visibility across all activities that are related to your product. This will obviously save you a lot of time. There are other, and I would focus on the 4th bullet here because I think it's quite interesting and becoming a very adopted solution to the challenge, and this is leverage faster test frameworks. So today we see that, especially on mobile, you have Appium, which is the cross-platform de facto test automation solution, but you also have XUI test that is developed and maintained by Apple, and you have Espresso that is developed and maintained by Google. These frameworks are white box testing frameworks. They are not really looking at the back and forth server-client interaction with an infrastructure behind. You simply develop XUI test in two applications. One is testing the other locally on the device, and this expedites the overall execution and insights. And this is one recommendation, to simply look at either eliminating slow pop-ups and stuff that you are using today with Appium, or simply switch and move. And it's not that hard to move from Appium to XUI test and Espresso, because Appium is kind of built on top of XUI test and UI Automator or Espresso, so you can do so. But definitely look at faster test frameworks that allows you to get feedback much faster. Obviously, they require different skill set. Mostly developers are going to use that, but still, this is a point for you to consider. On a web front, you see headless frameworks such as Puppeteer, that can also expedite your execution and insights, as well as they are not requiring you to do any setup of a Selenium grid. It's an headless browser. You don't launch the UI of the browser. You develop the test, you execute it immediately, and you get the results. So that's another point for you to consider as a solution to the release schedule. From a test automation stability, I think there are a lot of good tips and insights in this slide, but at the end of the day, it's about us, it's about the practitioners and how we follow best practices. Okay, the way you build the infrastructure, if we go back to the path towards continuous testing, you have seen the 5 stages towards the DevOps friendly zone. The first 3 stages are all about discipline. You choose a very small subset of stable test automation. You make sure that it's robust enough, produces consistent results. It bundles and integrates fine into your CI and runs stable across multiple platforms. Only then you expand. When you do that and you multiply it and expand that as a cultural best practice within the organization, it already includes by definition all of these best practices. When you do it, retroactively, obviously, it's much harder and it takes you a lot of time, resources, headache, pains, blaming, and actually bad vibes within the team. So start small, stabilize your test automation, use known best practices, page object model, monitor your test code, have some pairing and code reviews within the team. Make sure that it's stable enough to go to the CI and only then expand and so forth. So that's some tips and tricks to stabilize your overall test automation. That is the backbone of continuous testing. About test execution management and being smart about what you actually develop. So we need to understand something which is quite important, but sometimes we forget. When you look at test automation, test creation, we are creating test automation not for the sake of creation. We are looking to get fast feedback to identify business risks, going back to the continuous testing definition. If you want to get fast feedback, you want to eliminate business risk, you need to have an intelligent way of managing all the assets, all the test data, all the test artifacts. If you do not have that and you need to manually drill down into 10,000 test scenarios after each execution, if you don't have the right time, and B, you're going to be very, very sloppy about that because it's a lot of work and you're going to do a lot of mistakes and maybe get to the wrong conclusion. So we see today that a lot of machine learning, AI tools are coming to the rescue and trying to help practitioners, management, to come up with smart dashboards from the CI, from your entire test execution, per platform, across platforms, just to allow you to be more smart and more fast in the way you assess quality per each execution. Test authoring ties back to the 2 slides ago about being not just smart, but being also under some discipline and best practice. So even if you don't think that you are good enough, you have your peers and counterparts that can help you by pairing, coaching you, but you need to use these best practices. I didn't try them. I used to use the same thing as a practitioner in the past. So you need to follow some, judgment and common sense when you create your test, because once you created a test automation scenario, it's there until you exclude it. So when it's there, you need to continuously maintain it. You need to own it. So do it smart from the beginning. It will just reduce the pain, the headache, the maintenance, and the overall cost throughout the life cycle of this test. So there are a few tips here. Measure it. Look at how many times this test failed, how many times this test found actually a bug. Maybe this test is a duplicate. Maybe it's no longer relevant. So you can think about many angles of managing a life cycle of a test case just to be efficient over time. As promised, I'm also going to provide from my experience, and again, this is not when sometimes people hear measurements, KPIs, metrics, people think that this is kind of a finger pointing at someone that is doing something wrong or right. No, that's not about that. We are looking at continuous improvement, okay? Measurements towards improvement. It's not about finger pointing. And if you do not measure your ongoing activities and success, also failures, you cannot measure what you do not see. So there are a few things here. I'm sure that those of you online may have been using this kind of metrics or some others. This is just a small subset of metrics that I've been using. If you go to my previously mentioned book, my latest book, Continuous Testing for DevOps Professional, there is a subsection in this book just about metrics. So it has a long list of many recommended practices and metrics to show you where you are from a maturity standpoint and from a best practices standpoint. So I just mentioned a few things here. So obviously, you want to measure how fast are your testing activities moving. It's not just about test automation, it's about the quality of the test creation. How many tests are flaky? How much time a test execution or a test case lasts? And it's not mentioned in this slide, but there is a nice metric that is known in the Agile and DevOps testing world. And the recommended practice show that if a test scenario end-to-end takes you over 3 minutes, it either means that it's the wrong test or it's too complicated to run the test, and maybe it would be wise for you to break it into maybe 2 test scenarios. The longer the test scenario takes, and you can only know it by measuring. So the longer the test scenario will take you, the longer or the higher risk you have along the way to create bottlenecks, flakiness, and instabilities in the pipeline, especially when you execute this as part of your CI. So test duration and test flakiness, these are, in my mind, very critical insights for you to know and make the judgment based on the findings if this test should remain in the pipeline, should be continuously executed, maybe broken into more test scenarios, etc. Percentage of automated versus manual testing. I think that's not the old, all the metrics that people used to measure in the past. This is, I think, coming to measure, the overall utilization of your resources within each feature team. I mentioned that we have 3 different personas, right? We have the business tester, we have the SDET, and we have the developer. If you see that you have too many manual test cases, it means that you are lacking technical resources to own test automation creation, or you have an opportunity to use the high amount of resources that are doing manual and exploratory testing by using more BDD and cordless testing to join, or to boost your test automation coverage. Other types of metrics are about the application quality. MTDD is one of them, mean time to detection. The longer or the later in the cycle that you find the defect can teach you a lot about the overall process and the overall life cycle of your iteration. It can mean that you are not testing on the right platforms. It can mean that you are not really covering enough grounds within the cycle. It can mean many things. So knowing the average time it takes you to detect a defect from the time the code was introduced, etc., is a nice metric for you to have and maintain. There are other elements of cost, pipeline efficiency, how many builds, how much time takes you to run a job, which includes a lot of testing. So these are all things that you want to measure. And again, you can pick and choose from this, and you can add your own based on your objectives. But obviously, if you're not measuring your continuous testing activities, you're not just blind, you're not really going to make an improvement going forward. So again, not finger pointing at anyone, just allowing management to improve and look forward. So the way Perfecto looks at the 4 pillars of success after this entire lecture on continuous testing, the challenges that you see in test automation. So Perfecto is offering a unified solution that combines all of the 4 pillars: creation, execution in a smart lab in the cloud for mobile and web, with a smart and AI-driven analytics. This is an example of the architectural slide. That's an architectural view, sorry, of the Perfecto lab. From a creation standpoint, we support not just the traditional open source frameworks such as Selenium, Appium, Espresso, and XUI test. We also provide for business testers Quantum. Quantum is a BDD framework that is based on standard Cucumber, TestNG, has plugins to Eclipse and IntelliJ. In addition, we have a Selenium Cordless that records and playback with machine learning for web testing. So you can see that the creation layers has here full support for all 3 personas. It also comes, this is just for the mobile, but also for web, we have the same layer of advanced capabilities, such as Touch ID and fingerprint, face recognition, image injection, voice assistant testing through audio injection, network virtualization, location mocking, and much more. And it's all software as a service in the cloud. So that's the creation layer. On the execution, and I mentioned about the execution earlier, that if you do not have a strong ability to run in parallel with orchestration, bursting, queuing, sharding, dividing a large amount of test cases into small chunks across multiple platforms, you will be slower than you actually are asked to. So boosting your overall time to market also relies on a smart execution layer. And when you have it backed in the cloud with Perfecto, that's how it looks like. You can execute in parallel across desktops, desktop browsers, and mobile devices in different geographies with an unlimited elasticity and capacity. The lab itself, as mentioned, that's a software as a service. So it's a cloud that is fully enterprise grade, fully certified with all of these certifications and many more. Supports a lot of AI algorithms for smart and self-healing. So if a device on the Perfecto Cloud gets disconnected from the network, and it happens, that's a mobile phone. Even when I'm at home, my smartphones often disconnects from the Wi-Fi and reconnects. We do it proactively through smart monitoring of the lab. So the customers have the ability to continuously test their applications. We have full environment control with cellular network emulation. We have full artifact collection. So if you want to identify and collect trends from your execution, HAR files for network captures, logs, device logs, videos, screenshots, and many more, you can get it from the Perfecto Cloud as a service. It's all fully secured as a private cloud. We fully provide same-day device and operating system deliveries. So today we are looking at Android Q, which is in a mature beta. We are looking at iOS 13 and iPad OS. These are all fully supported, even in the beta stages. They are fully supported already today in the cloud for our clients. So that's how continuous testing looks like, because organizations today already needs to look into what's coming. The Android Q is about to be GA in the next couple of weeks. In 2 or 3 months, we will see the iOS 13 being GA, so organizations can already get ready to what's coming. And finally, and not less important, it's all about the single pane of glass, having all of the things that I've discussed earlier visible in the same UI, in the same pane, single pane of glass. And as you can see here, there can be multiple reasons for failure that can slow you down. With the smart analytics that we are providing, Perfecto is providing, teams can be much more proactive and be much more smarter about their testing assets, and they can be more proactive about fixing issues in advance, so their pipeline is much more healthy. And you can see here just a few categories, script and framework issues. We are able, through machine learning and AI algorithms, to identify the root cause of failures, whether it's object related, an element locator which wasn't found, a pop-up that blocked the test cases, coding practices, synchronization and time, or many other reasons. There are also backend issues, lab issues, and other orchestration issues like a device in use or a device which wasn't available from different reasons because it was disconnected. We can give the full visibility into the test execution results in one single pane of glass. Once it's given to you, you can see how one single pipeline looks like in one single UI. You can see that there are many jobs and branches being presented to management and executives in one view. You can see the trends, you can see the history for each job. You can see if there were spikes, if you are underutilizing or overutilizing your lab, and you can be proactive about that. If a build takes too much time, or if a build consistently has a test that fails, like here, you can be very proactive and dismiss or exclude the test, so you have a more green and healthy pipeline until you resolve the issues. In addition, you can also get risk and focus area mapping, cross-platform reports for mobile and web, and with that you can move much faster towards releasing to production. So with that insight, I would like to finalize this presentation by summarizing, the Perfecto unified solution for continuous testing. And as mentioned, Perfecto is all about supporting DevOps teams that try to mature their continuous testing, and we allow them to do so by providing them smart creation solutions with smart executions, analytics in a very smart cloud software as a service lab that is always on and up to date, and I've shown you the architecture and other artifacts that are supported. With that, I would like to leave the remaining 5 minutes for questions, if there are any online.
Great, thanks, Yaron. Yeah, we'll try to get to as many questions as possible. While you guys are submitting them, I just want to announce the winners. We have 2 $50 gift cards to 2 lucky listeners who stayed with us today, and those winners will be Charlene Henson and Joe Roberts Jr. So now to get started with questions. Yaron, with the 4 pillars that you mentioned, what can teams do if they're lacking, one or more of the key pillars?
Okay, so that's a good question. I mentioned, I think, in the beginning that you can invest a lot in a few of these pillars, but when you are missing one, you need to come up with like an alternative, and the alternative can be build it or do it yourself. Let's take it as an example. You do not have the level of reporting that I've just demonstrated. You have the other elements, so you need to have some kind of a smart reporting that can support the different practitioners that are using different tools. So it might take you some time to develop that in-house, and the only thing that I can say that if you develop, it's not that it's not possible. It has a price, so you can develop it in-house. You need to develop it in-house. You cannot go around that, otherwise you will remain slow in your journey towards DevOps. You only need to understand that you need to continuously maintain it in-house. Whatever you build in-house, you maintain it in-house, and as your product matures, you might need to build more software on top of that, and it can become a very huge pain. So my recommendation: start from the infrastructure yourself, see what you can come together as a unified solution, instead of stitching and borrowing from different vendors, etc.
Great. Now, is there a particular key pillar that you find teams struggle with the most?
I think that that's an amazing question. I think that it depends on the practitioner itself. So I presented 3 personas. I presented the business tester and the SDET and the developers. If you ask me which is the biggest pain as a team, I think it's all about the time to market and reducing business risk. But when you break this question into the different personas, each persona will have a different challenge. I think that the business tester mostly suffers from the creation. Is unable to create robust test automation because he's lacking some coding skills. If you go to the SDET, the SDET needs high-scale lab with full results and analysis that can help him be more successful. Same goes with the developer. So I think it's the answer goes and breaks down into the persona, but at the end of the day, they all need to have this unified solution serving all of them.
Great. Now you mentioned the cloud. How important would you say it is to have a lab that is cloud-based?
I think today, if you look at almost any enterprise in the world, okay, there is no enterprise that does not use cloud services for at least half of what he's doing today in the IT domain. He's using cloud for storage. He's using cloud for development and microservices. Power computing. You talk about Docker and containers. So cloud is not a new thing. Cloud, especially in the testing space, is so critical just because of the scale and the complexity and the constant changes that we see today in the market. I mentioned iPad OS, iOS 13, Android Q, the monthly releases that you see today with Chrome, Firefox, and other browsers. This requires you to have a self-maintained lab that can serve the entire team. When you're doing it yourself, when you're managing it in-house and not in the cloud, you need a full-time team just to maintain, manage in a secure way this aspect, and it simply doesn't scale. It doesn't work.
Okay, I believe we have time for one more question. We're seeing AI be applied to testing solutions today too. So what role would you say AI plays with all of this?
I think that AI, especially in continuous testing, I've just demonstrated AI from the creation when I talk about Perfecto Cordless and AI on the smart analytics. I think that AI is going to become a dominant technology requirement for the entire DevOps pipeline activities just because of the scale, the level of, not just test data, but all the data that is being developed, generated throughout the pipeline is becoming so huge, tons of data, because when you're doing continuous everything, you're generating tons of things. You need something smart to help you, A, get visibility into what you're doing, and B, improve and be much more fast about your decision making as your data grows. So I think that AI and machine learning are going to become critical players throughout the entire DevOps pipeline per each activity.
Right now, before we go, Iran, is there just one final thought or key takeaway you want to leave our attendees with today?
Yeah, I think that the bottom line here is if attendees can look today, like in the mirror, in their current, continuous testing processes, maturity, and see from creation, execution, lab, and analysis, the 4 pillars that I have defined today, which is the most painful one, and how they can at least solve one area in their overall pipeline. I think that they will see tremendous return on investment when they do so. But first, they need to do this, I would say, due diligence and see what they're lacking the most out of these 4 pillars and start marching towards improvement.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for a great presentation. Again, that was Iran Kinsbrunner, Chief Software Evangelist at Perfecto. And I'd like to thank Perfecto for sponsoring today's event, as well as attendees for joining us today. Until next time, I'm Christina Cardoza with SD Times.